Hi everyone, it's Lisa from Been There, Got Out. Now we're going on live for real with Greg Glassick. He's been on before. He's a surveillance expert and a private investigator, and I'm really glad that he's coming on again. It seems like the theme of this week is surveillance and stalking, and we're just going to continue with that. So Greg, I just saw your request. Let me invite and then you'll be on. Okay. Good. So you should pop on any second. There he is. Good. Thank you, Greg, for coming back on again.
Good morning.
Good afternoon, wherever we are. We're on opposite coast.
Yeah.
So tell us again, for those of us who haven't seen you before, what you do, who you are.
My name is Greg Glassick. I'm a private investigator and the CEO of a private investigation agency here in Seattle, Washington. And we do a variety of investigations for corporate clients and individuals when they have issues they want help with. Former police officer, and I've been in this business for about 20 years.
Wow. Okay, great. All right. So I was saying that the theme of this week seems to be stalking and surveillance. And I'm wondering, what would be the benefit to hiring something like a private security company like yours versus just relying on the police if someone's in an unsafe situation?
Yeah, thank you. Well, often, and I think legitimately, the first line of defense would be the police department. If somebody's feeling unsafe or feeling threatened or actually being threatened, going to the police and making a report is absolutely the first thing to do to get that documented. But what we're finding throughout the country, and particularly up here in the Northwest, that our police agencies are overwhelmed and understaffed and often don't understand some of the nuances of domestic violence. And so they won't get a lot of attention sometimes without an injury or without some very, very firm piece of evidence that shows that something's happening. So oftentimes hiring a private investigation company to come and assist will help you gather some of that evidence that will add weight to your story when you do go to the police or to follow up.
So it's almost like you have to wait for something terrible to happen before you contact the police, who then often are not trained in domestic violence. And we hear this complaint all the time from our people, is that when sometimes they'll get a really great police officer, but often the police aren't schooled in coercive control and they can't understand exactly the nature of what's going on.
Yeah, we rely on our police officers for so much, and they get a lot of training, but they're not experts in every field. And often they're going from call to call to call. I know one of our large metropolitan police departments is down 600 officers. And
Wow.
So that just means each one of them is running from call to call. Most of these have some sort of violence or a threat to human life that are involved. So anything less than that often just won't kind of get the attention. Unfortunately, they often rely on something actually having occurred, and then they're more reactive, when a lot of people are really looking to try to be proactive and prevent something from happening.
Right, exactly. Now, being a former police officer and now having this private security company, how is the training different for your people versus, say, what you were trained on as a police officer?
Yeah, well, the training that we offer is often going to be on the job working with someone who's dealt with this kind of thing before. So we might have a detective, for example, on staff that worked with family issues. And this would be somebody who would have dealt with these cases many, many times. And so we'll have somebody that's newer shadow with them and start learning the business that way. I can say over the 20 years of being in business, we've probably had 20 or 30 cases that involve domestic violence, coercion, stalking type of issues within a domestic situation.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I was going to say that we recently interviewed a bodyguard who also deals with a lot of security issues. And he said, and I had made a post out of it, how an abuser's greatest tool is, my volume can just go down with the call. Their biggest tool is instilling fear in a victim. So what are some common ways that you've seen how toxic people instill fear in others, especially related to domestic violence?
Yeah. Unfortunately, some people who kind of live their life as a predator develop those same skills that a wild animal predator would in being able to smell out or be aware of weakness. And so using that against someone else is one of their most valuable tools, is to try to increase that fear level. So that might be coercion. If you do this, then I'll do this. It could be isolation. That is one of the trademark characteristics of a domestic violence situation, where they isolate that individual socially and financially, so that they take away some of their power to get help, because they don't have the financial resources. They don't have that set of friends and family that are close to them that can help them. So oftentimes it's isolation, a threat of physical fear, taking away a resource that's important to them, threatening a family member or a resource like a job. I'll show up at your job and make a scene.
Mm-hmm.
And when people are on the bubble, or maybe new in a job, or not powerful in that situation, that can be a powerful incentive to do what they ask.
Yeah. Well, what about, we talked a little bit about stalking last time, and we talked a lot about technology. So tell us how technology has helped people stalk more or stalk better than in the past, when someone would just physically be limited to following another person.
Yeah. Well, I think the big difference now versus 20 or 30 years ago is, back in that time, most of this would have to be done in person. They would have to follow you. They would have to come up and approach you. They would have to approach or call friends, family, neighbors, that kind of thing, to really get under your skin. Now, with our digital footprint being everywhere, having our data being sold and shared, throughout the digital space, that information is more easily found. And with those of us that are on Facebook or any of the social media groups, there are more ways to find out what someone is doing, who they're participating with, who their friends groups are, what they're doing on a daily basis. All of us can come up with stories of people that we know that post everything about their personal life online. And so when that occurs, it just gives that person that much more information to be able to interfere and be coercive and be intimidating. So I think that digital space and the digital data is one of our biggest vulnerabilities now.
Yeah, definitely. And last time we talked about how surveillance can be done through items that we might not expect. And I remember in particular, you mentioned a gaming system. And we had a client the other day talking about that, how she felt like her ex was somehow monitoring her through her daughter's Nintendo. So can you tell us about the gaming systems and any other things that we might not obviously realize that we could be tracked through or monitored through?
Yeah, well, so any digital device that connects to Wi-Fi and has any type of sharing permissions is a vulnerability. And so if obviously our phone is going to be the biggest single one, because most of us have smartphones, most of us have many apps that ask for permissions. And so you think about, if you join an app and it asks you permission to have access to all your contacts, permission to have access to your text and emails, permission to have access to your photos and videos, permission to record your voice, right? All of those things are asking for permission to get that data from you, and then you lose some amount of control of where it goes. So certainly our phone and the permissions on our apps are a big vulnerability. I can address in probably a few minutes about how to lock some of that down. But then you've got all of your Wi-Fi enabled devices around your home. So most of our TVs are connected to Wi-Fi for programming and for other apps that we use through there. Many of our computers, printers, some of our refrigerators are connected to the Wi-Fi that have different permissions. And then you look at gaming consoles, which have some of those same things. Alexa and Siri, some of the smart speakers certainly have all of those same permissions. And so all of those are vulnerable to being hacked, either forcibly hacked, or of course, if they are able to get the access to a password, then they just have a natural way to get in and record or to listen. There are many stories about this happening in different ways. One example that really bothered me was and this is before they fixed this hack, I believe, but the Ring doorbell became really popular because you could see who came up to your door, approached your door, you get an alert, you could talk to them through the phone, but that has been hacked or was hacked so that people could use that that people were getting spoken to over their own Ring doorbell in a hacking incident. So all of those kinds of devices have the ability to be penetrated. And so one of the best things to do is password hygiene, which we can kind of go through. Mm-hmm. That is regularly changing passwords. If you have a negative incident with someone or someone leaves your house that might have been living with you, one of the first things you're going to want to do is change your Wi-Fi password and start changing some of your passwords and keeping those in a protected password keeper. Passwords that are long phrases that are be very hard to guess are good ones, and not sharing those passwords. And then going through some of your apps. You can do a hard reset on your phone with the carrier, reload those apps, and then set those permissions to private and deny access to voice recording and your contacts and your photos and your emails. And it does make it a little harder to use some of those things, but it definitely drastically reduces the chance that someone would be able to hack in and take control of that.
Okay, so I have 3 things I want to say. I'll start with the first. The question just came in, like, does it even matter that they can see everything? Like, I'm just over it. Like, it's exhausting.
I get it. I get it. Our digital footprint is out there. I mean, I'm a professional in this business, and I get attacked regularly. And I have come so close to letting people have information because they were so good at falsifying their identity. I got hacked last year for an Apple Card because someone I knew very closely had reached out and asked me to help them and go get an Apple Card for them. And everything was so legitimate, and she was such a good friend. I went out and did this, and then found out hours later that her email had been hacked and 5,000 of her contacts had received the same information. So I get it. It's hard. It's getting harder. Do know that the legitimate software companies are working on trying to shore this up. They're spending a lot of money on password protection and cybersecurity information, but we have to do our part in reading some of the fine print, setting our passwords, going on private groups when we can and not being on public groups, just sort of locking down our identity as much as we can. That's really on us, is to try as hard as we can to lock down our own personal information best that we can.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other thing I was thinking is, how can you be monitored through your refrigerator?
Well, so I am not aware of a specific hack through the refrigerator. However, with 5G was created because of the Internet of Things. We have so many devices in our home that require internet. 5G was kind of created for this. So we have refrigerators that can tell you you're low on milk or you're out of eggs. Okay, they can tell when you come up and open the refrigerator and how long that's open for. With that kind of data being shared through that, there is the vulnerability that LG out of Korea has someone there that has left a doorway in their software, and a hacker, when they have nothing better to do than sit around, they're going to search through that code and try to find a doorway. And then once they have the doorway, they often release that into the wild to other hackers and say, hey, I found a way into LG refrigerators. And then all of a sudden, that information can get shared. Someone could say, potentially, I know someone is at home right now because they just opened their refrigerator.
Oh, or maybe they haven't been home for a while because no one's opened the refrigerator in a week.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that's one example. You can go down the rabbit hole all day on all of these devices.
I go down enough rabbit holes. No. Okay. The other thing you had said was about permissions. Like, often I'll get asked permission to access my contacts. I'm always like, do I have to? So if you give permission. Like say I go onto TikTok and I have an account and it says, can we have access to all your contacts? Because then we'll connect you. And I'm like, I don't really want to be my contacts to be connected, my personal contacts to my business. So, you know, should you not give permission?
I try not to. And sometimes I get to that point where it says accept or deny, and I hit deny,
Yeah.
and it says you can't use this app unless you approve this. And so I have to make a choice at that point. Do I really want this app, or would I rather not have the entire world of one of these apps having my information? And so I have to make that decision. In our business, some of the things that we would do is we would have separate devices. We'd have separate identity, separate login information. And so I have a work phone and a personal phone. And so maybe my personal phone, I do some of the stuff. My work phone, I don't do any of it. That's pretty common, is to have multiple devices where we have one that is completely locked down for our professional use, and then one that is maybe more open. There are some different software applications out there and companies that offer apps and hardened phones for people who are particularly vulnerable or high net worth individuals or really big targets, that you can actually get an iPhone or an Android phone that has extra software involved that really locks everything down. I mean, all those things are possible at a cost, but it comes down to that personal decision: accept, deny. If I accept, I'm opening myself up a little bit. If I deny, I may not be able to use that app. It's a tough choice.
Yeah, yeah. So I just saw a comment that someone said she had microphones in her light bulbs. How common is that? And are there people who manufacture light bulbs with microphones, or do people somehow figure out how to get them in there?
No, they're actually manufactured that way. If you go to Google, you could probably Google up, light bulb with camera and audio. And so they sell these surveillance devices that look like any regular objects. And so there are alarm clock radios that have a tiny camera in them. They have fire detectors.
Yep, that was one of our clients.
Fire detector. Yeah, that have cameras and audio in them, light bulbs, all sorts of things. Those, of course, somebody has to have access to install that in your home. And then that information has to be relayed somehow. So that's just something to think about, is even if you have a device like that in your home, that has to get the information from the device onto the web and then out to someone else. And so that's typically going to be sent through a Wi-Fi router or through some sort of Wi-Fi that's localized. And so by locking down and changing passwords to Wi-Fi, that's one way you can kind of prevent that from going out. It may be working, but if it can't get onto the internet, it can't send the information.
Well, that's really interesting. Okay, so speaking of that, we have a lot of clients that come to us with what I call weird coincidences. Like they'll say, I was talking about something with my kids, and then all of a sudden my ex knew and mentioned it to the kids, like about we were going to have hot chocolate in the middle of summer. Like, what do you think? How can you tell if someone is surveilling you? Because sometimes it happens too many times and it's just so specific. Do you think those weird coincidences might hint that someone is being surveilled?
Well, yeah. I mean, we like to say we don't believe in coincidences. Sometimes there are coincidences, but I've had the same experience of talking to someone about a product, and then I go on to Facebook or whatever, and the first item they're offering me is that product.
I know. So, what is that?
Right. That is likely an audio feed that has been involved in that app that is sending that information. And there's an algorithm saying, Greg is looking for a refrigerator. Let's offer him a refrigerator. So while I don't want to live my life feeling like I'm under constant surveillance, there is a bit of that going on with the amount of digital information that is being collected and sold. So that's the commercialized sale and distribution of that data. If you want to look at a very personal situation, I would be looking at the Internet of Things, wired devices, connected devices, Alexa, Siri, game consoles, phones, all of those other things that have the ability to transfer data back and forth. I would be looking at those and changing passwords, shutting them down, turning them off, unplugging them, And then probably, if it would continue to happen, I would probably start looking for other devices that might have that connectivity. Looking for electronic countermeasure devices is very difficult. It's a lot harder than it looks like on TV. The last time we did a residence, we had a team of 4 people searching for 6 hours in about a 2,000 square foot home. We brought in a portable x-ray machine.
This is the Ghostbusters part of your career.
That you go over all the walls looking for weird wiring and devices, and you have a computer that is sucking in all sorts of different frequencies, and you have to go through and eliminate each one of those. So you'll identify a frequency, and you'll look around, and you'll say, oh, that's the Wi-Fi router. Okay, so we can cross that one up. Oh, that's my camera that's plugged in, that's Wi-Fi enabled. Okay, that's my printer. That's connected to the Wi-Fi, and going through those and eliminating those, and then going and searching for the ones that you can't find. It can be a really difficult process.
Yeah.
But one of the simple things you can do that is somewhat effective is you can turn your phone on, turn on the Wi-Fi, and look for the potential Wi-Fi connections and see if you can identify what those are. And you can walk around the house and you'll see some will get weaker and some will get stronger. And so if you suspect that there's something weird in there, you can walk around looking for these Wi-Fi pulses to come up, find the name, Google the name, and you might find that that is X device. And then you can try to narrow down where that might be and look for it. Physically searching for these items is probably 80% effective in eliminating them. Understand that they can be very small, they can be hidden in other objects, and so looking for their digital signal is probably the best way to do it. But physically searching with your eyes can be very helpful. And there's some other strange kind of techniques to help you find cameras and that kind of thing. But it's not easy. I'll just say that. It's not easy.
Wow. Okay. So we got a question a little while ago while you were talking about what's a good response to say to family and friends who say, oh, you're just being paranoid?
You're not paranoid if they're actually watching you, or they're actually out to get you. So that is a hard one.
Yeah.
I think probably just being honest and saying, you know, I might be being paranoid, but I'm really feeling this, and I'm getting those tingles in the back of my neck that make me feel like something's odd. And for that reason, I need to pursue this for my own mental health. I need to pursue this and try to eliminate as many things as I can. Of course, if the person that you're worried about has a legitimate documented past of being a bad actor, you know, you might be able to share that with them as well and say, well, this person has done this before and now they're targeting me. And again, it can be hard because some of the things that we feel are hard to explain. They can be hard to identify and bring out the evidence. And so it can look crazy from the outside.
Yeah.
At the same time, you know, we do have mental health issues throughout the country, and we have had several clients who probably were not being surveilled, but had some of these other issues. So that is something you're going to definitely come up against with law enforcement interaction, is they get both sides of that so often, it becomes very hard for them to determine, is this someone who is really being threatened and stalked, or is this person suffering from some mental health issues? And when they come up to that kind of decision, they often will do nothing.
Yeah.
That will usually be their answer, is I can't help you unless there's something physical that you can show me.
Yeah.
And then oftentimes that's when we'll get a call and we'll try to suss through that stuff and try to help them identify something that we could take to the police, or come and do some surveillance activities to get video of someone coming onto their property or doing damage, or hiding cameras in their home or whatever to be able to pick up somebody coming in. And then we can take that to the police.
Okay. So short of, well, you said the thing about like feeling the tingles and then getting the police to, you know, getting evidence to present to the police. But are there any other ways that you've noticed, just simple tips to tell if someone is surveilling you, or it depends on the individual case?
Well, I mean, it does come down to the individual case. However, there are some things that I think most of us have that we can use. And something that is very underrated is our own instinct of fear, our own instinct that something's not right. You know, humans have developed that instinct over a long time to help keep us alive and keep us safe. So if you feel the tingle in the back of your neck, you feel your spidey sense going off, that's a good time to look around and try to find out, what do you think is causing that? What's going on? So I think listening to your instincts, trying to follow up on that, those are good things to do. Um, Having good situational awareness. I think this has been dumbed down for a lot of people, is situational awareness, because we're in crowded spaces. We're in a culture where we want to embrace all sorts of diversity and different things. And so some of the things that might have felt really weird to us before now are starting to feel more normal because we're dealing with them more often.
Like
So,
what? Like what? Can you give us an example?
well, I hate using examples because someone's going to be
I
offended.
know, and I love examples.
I think about last time I was in New York City, a busy place. I walking down the street with my child at 11 o'clock at night, and I've got a naked lady walking by. Okay, so that's different behavior. In my town, you would never see that. That is very odd. In New York City, it's like, there's Mrs. Jones out for her nightly walk.
And you know,
Right?
we're New Yorkers, so I'm like, that's not that shocking. Yeah.
Right. Or a guy dressed up in it with a samurai sword, something like that, right? I mean, those, in some areas that would be shocking.
Uh-huh.
And in some areas now we just sort of accept that as part of daily life.
Right.
And so I think trying to pay attention to when it really does feel weird, when you meet somebody who you just get that feeling, creepy, creepy, creepy,
Yeah.
pay attention. That guy's probably creepy.
Right.
And so we look at some things with families and children, protecting them. One of the biggest things is just listening to your instincts. Predators will use those things, false teaming, where they'll come up and they'll say, oh, your child has a lovely whatever. And if you get that creepy feeling, you want to just create separation from that person, not interact with that person. But they're going to use this desire for social norms and politeness, try to get close to you. And then the more they do that, the less their creepiness feels creepy, and you've already sort of accepted that this is okay. And they'll take
That's a great example. I know you don't like examples, but that is the perfect example, because it makes me think of that cognitive dissonance where someone's acting like they're being friendly, but you feel that creeped out feeling, and then you're like, how, but they're just being nice, so I'm doubting myself, because why would they be nice if there was something wrong? So that's a great example.
Well, good, because it's effective and they know that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of one of the predators' toolkits. So we have a thing that we teach police officers and security and civilians, and it's just called situational awareness. And one of the things, we just look at a color code: white, yellow, orange, and red. White is labeled as unalert and unaware. And so we tell a police officer, security, anybody else, the only time you should be in condition white is when you're in a place that's absolutely safe. I'm inside my house. I'm on the couch. I'm reading. My house is locked. I'm good to go. I can let the rest of the world go. I can read my book and focus on my book and not pay attention. If I'm in the shower or asleep, those are places where it's totally okay to be in condition white, where we can really relax. Condition yellow is where we want people to be almost all the time when they're outside. Condition yellow is alert and aware, but not afraid. So my head is up, I'm looking around, I'm listening, I'm smelling, I'm feeling, I'm paying attention to the noises around. Was it noisy and it just got quiet? Or was it quiet and just got noisy? Do I get the tingles in my neck? So that yellow, I'm not stressed out, my heart rate isn't up, I'm just being aware of my surroundings. That's where we want to live. Condition orange is where we've specified it's an alert. And so that's, I hear a noise that's weird. I hear a truck rumbling down the street, or I see this guy on the street that's walking toward me that's just made eye contact, and now he's approaching directly at me. Again, I'm not necessarily afraid, but I've noticed something odd, something different, something that could be a problem. And then I make a decision what to do. I'm going to cross the street. I'm going to stand up taller and look them in the eye and look tough. I'm going to say, don't come talk to me, or I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do to sort of avoid that situation. I'm going to get out of the street because there's a truck coming. So that's condition orange. So what we want people to do is be cycling between yellow and orange, yellow and orange, yellow and orange all the time. If you're driving, you're doing that. You're seeing somebody speeding up on your left-hand side, you're aware of it, you may move over a lane just to avoid the situation. That's yellow and orange. Red, condition red is now my heart rate is going, my adrenaline's kicking in, I got chemicals flushing, I'm in the fight. That's when something bad has happened and I'm going into emergency zone. That can be very valuable. It gives us that energy to fight or to run or to escape. But we can't stay there very long because of the physiological nature of that adrenaline being dumped. So we've got white, yellow, orange, and red. We want to be in yellow and orange when we're outside in the world. We reserve white for our really true safe spaces. So just being aware of that and being conscious of that out in the world can give you some protection.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'm thinking with a lot of the people that we deal with, they're cycling between orange and red because of PTSD. It's that hypervigilance. It's where the amygdala has already been worn down by so many repeated stressors that they are in like a constant fight or flight mode.
Yeah, that's really difficult. A lot of the people that we hire are former veterans and police officers, and it's common for us to have hypervigilance because we live in a world that is potentially always dangerous. Mm-hmm. And so that has negative physiological effects, obviously, for stress and sleep and disease and all those other things. So we really want to look at ways to mitigate that and bring us back down a little bit. Because it's an unhealthy place to live. And so we want to, get counseling and medication and all those other things we can do to feed the good parts of us and help reduce that. Certainly. And also we know that once that amygdala gets fired up, we're in that kind of fight or flight thinking mode, and we lose our good decision-making skills, right? Our higher level of thinking. And so we're operating at more of an animalistic level, and we probably won't make some of the best decisions. So that's one of the key things for an operator or somebody who's out there in sometimes dangerous situations is staying in orange as long as you can, because you will make better decisions in that position than you will once you get really triggered. Hard thing to do, and once your life gets solidified kind of in that, it's hard to come back, but it's possible.
Yeah, and I like how simple that is with the different color codes, because I know for me in the past and for so many of our people, it's hard to sort of check in with our feelings. And I feel like, it's almost like checking in with our colors. Like, how do I feel right now? My stomach is hurting. I'm totally stressed out. I'm probably in red. How am I going to get back down to just paying attention, yellow, orange, like being aware, but not being completely freaked out. And having moments of white, of like peace. I need peace to just really wind down and come back to the bottom. And then before I go outside again, be between the yellow and orange.
Yeah, we all need that. Those are just tools that help us be effective. And so some of those, there's some assessment list about self-assessment. Am I injured, right? Am I bleeding? No, I'm not bleeding. Am I tired? Oh, I'm exhausted. Well, okay, I'm not thinking right because I'm exhausted. Am I hungry? Am I doing some of those self-assessment things, and then taking care of some of those issues can help you come back down or get into that place. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Okay. We just got another question. Like, is it helpful? Actually, let me go back here. Is it better to not show fear to an abuser? Like, is it better to act like you're not afraid?
Well, that really is a very situationally specific answer. So if you are in a vulnerable position and they're standing over you with the power to injure you, then you got to do what you got to do to survive. So that's hard to answer. Generally on the street, just in random situations, being strong, being a hard target is the best thing to do. Most predators want a soft target. They want to be able to do what they're going to do and get away clean. That's what they want. And so if you make that hard for them by being tough, being strong, being very aware of your surroundings, that's oftentimes they're going to pass you by and they're going to go pick a softer target. That is statistically true. At the same time, if you're just particularly vulnerable and they have the power to injure you, standing up like that may make it worse. So I can't give a generalized answer to that, but I can say generally predators will choose a soft target and they will bypass a hard target. So when I'm in a neighborhood that I don't feel comfortable in or safe and I need to be there, I'm going to walk around with a stride like I know where I'm going. I'm going to meet people's eyes. I'm going to be looking around, and I'm not going to stop to read a map on a corner like I'm lost. Okay, right? And most people are just going to walk right by you. They'll just bypass you, and they'll look for that soft target.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, you know, we go into New York City a lot because we're so close by, and I have a teenage daughter who tends to be very kind to people who ask her something, like strangers in the street. And I've said to her, I know you feel like you're being rude, but you can do that where we live. But when you go into New York City, just keep walking. Because in my mind, it makes her a soft target to appear friendly and sort of naive. So I also was going to say, are there specific qualities of a soft target? I know, again, it depends, but are there anything that, you know, if you had to come up with some kind of description or graphic of like what a typical soft target looks like? And I'm not talking gender either, obviously, but what kinds of traits?
Yeah, well, I would challenge everybody to go out today and look around a busy area and just people watch. And what you'll see, you'll be able to identify them. And so the soft target often is somebody who's got their head down, maybe slouched a little bit in a weak position, walking sort of maybe carefully, not looking around, very much like they want to be left alone and they don't want to look at anybody or see anything. That smells like a soft target. Somebody who has their head held high, they're walking at a brisk pace, and they look like they know where they're going and they've got the strength to go there. That's a hard target.
Confidence.
Predators can smell that out so quickly. It shocks me sometimes how well they can smell that out. We had a case where we had a domestic violence victim that we took off the grid, and we were staying in hotels, and she smoked, and so we would go out with her when she smoked. Well, almost every time we'd go out, she would end up getting approached by some weird dude who from a block away could just see from her stance and her demeanor and the way she positioned her body that she was a victim or had been a victim, and they would come and approach her. And it just was so powerful how that predator-prey thing comes off. And so even if we feel like we're a victim, even if we feel weak, what we put off doesn't have to be that. Perception can be reality. If you put off those vibes like, I am strong and I am confident and I know where I'm going and I will whip you if you come close to me, people feel that. They sense that. Even if you don't believe it truly, they'll sense that, and that is definitely a good set of armor to have.
Yeah, of course, the line "fake it till you make it" and that confidence. Like I don't want to interrupt you, but before I forget, like I'm thinking when I was a brand new teacher, and that first year was scary, and I was really shy at the time, but I was like, I have to present, you know, and I was very close in age to my students because I was teaching high school when I was 21. But being like very confident, like I have to look like the grown up, even though I blended with the kids, and it really did make a difference.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's powerful. I do want to go back to your original question about what can you do if you feel like you're being surveilled.
Yes.
So there's a term that we use is called SDR, or surveillance detection route. And so this is if we feel like we're being followed and we want to know whether we're really being followed, we'll do a surveillance detection route. And so normally in the normal world, if you're being followed, it's probably by one person. There's rarely a team because that requires so many resources and costs to follow somebody with a team. So it's usually with one person. So if you're in a car, you feel like you're being followed, make a series of unusual turns and continue that pattern of randomized turns for a period of time. And they'll either break off because they know that you're running a surveillance detection route, or they'll stay on you, in which you know that you're being followed. If you know you're being followed, then what you want to do is go to a safety zone. And for us, we'll identify those as police stations, fire stations, and sometimes hospitals. So if we have a client, executive protection client we're taking, and we pick up a tail, we have already pre-identified where all those safety zones in our area of operations, and we'll make those surveillance detection routes. And if we're still being followed, then we'll go right to a police substation and pull right up to the front door. And that may not get a police response, but usually it's enough for the person that's following to back off. And you can at least have some time to breathe and plan and get somebody to pick you up, or, wait for a while and then go the other route, or whatever it might be. But surveillance detection route is a way to identify whether someone is following you.
Okay, that's really helpful. Now, what about, when would it be a good idea to do surveillance on another person?
So if you feel like you're being targeted, and let's say you've made reports to the police and you've documented it, and you've got police reports, but they're not doing anything, and they say, we really can't help you, that might be a time to contact a private investigator, talk to them about your story, and have them help you come up with what your goals are. A big part of our job is just to figure out what your goals are and then come up with some that are realistic. So for example, if you're being followed and stalked, it might be, my goal is to provide some evidence to the police so that we can take some action. Whether that's a no contact order being filed, or whether that's the police arresting this person. And so what we'll do is talk about what's going on, and we'll figure out where are the boundaries of the law, that's where you are, and then how can we best get actual evidence to take to the police. And so that might be a observation report from a professional who's going to fill out an affidavit.
Oh, wait, Greg, your volume suddenly just went down.
Or be doing video surveillance so that we catch somebody coming onto your property. And if we can provide that to the police, oftentimes they will take action. So oftentimes when you're not getting the love or the attention that you need from the police department, that might be the time to contact a PI and say, what can you do to help me get to that next step?
Okay. And then how can these surveillance records or proof help someone in, let's say, like a high conflict divorce or a custody battle?
I'm sorry, my audio just went out, and I'm trying to get that.
Yeah, I saw that like a few seconds ago. Oh yeah, it's spinning. You're spinning. This happens a lot on Instagram, at least often once before, at least once during most of these interviews. So Greg's screen is still spinning. I don't know if you guys can hear me now. It looks like, Greg, you're back, maybe?
Yeah, I've got you.
Okay, good. All right. Yeah, you were spinning for a while, but I think you're back. Okay, so I had just said, how can these records help, surveillance records or proof, help someone in like a high conflict divorce or a custody battle?
Okay, so they can be both helpful and can be damaging depending on the case. So if there is an allegation of abuse or violence or stalking, then having some pattern of that abuse or stalking or behavior can definitely go a long way in convincing the judge or the commissioner, whoever it is, that one side is acting inappropriately, and they can help you by then signing some orders that give some direction, some boundaries.
Yeah, pause for 1 second, because I want to highlight what you just said, because it's the kind of thing we say to our clients all the time. A lot of times it's not an isolated incident that will get someone's attention in court. It's a pattern of behavior over time. So I'm glad that you said that as well. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
No, I mean, that's critical, right? Because and we could probably talk about this on and on, about the kinds of cases that they see, and it's hard for them to know, this person's saying this person's saying this. How do I know which is true? Is this just a strategy? Well, a pattern of behavior is a lot more convincing. So developing a pattern of behavior is helpful. The downside would be if someone is
claiming that you are an abuser and then you do surveillance of them, that can look like stalking. So it can be a fine line between making you look like a bad guy or an aggressor versus gathering evidence. So I think that's something you definitely want to consult with your attorney and talk about the strategy and get that very clear up front. I would never recommend that somebody just go do this stuff on their own without consulting their attorney, because it may be contrary to their best interests overall.
Yeah, good point.
And we both have stories probably where, had the individual gotten a private investigator to go do surveillance, it would have looked bad for them in court.
Right. Yeah, actually, a lawyer I'm going to be speaking to in a couple of weeks had a client who did that, and it blew up in her face. Yeah.
We're very careful with that.
Yeah. All right. So another quick question that just came in is, what if the stalking stopped because the person knew they were being surveilled, but it happened before that? Can you go back in time for evidence? Because I know a lot of things that we've heard and that we've experienced is when you're dealing with something in court, the judge is interested in what happened most recently. And if behavior stopped, they're kind of like, well, it's already fixed. But what do you think about that when someone's been stalking for a long time? We can imagine that they know they were called out and they decided to stop only because they were being monitored.
Well, I think that's where documentation can help. And it seems so simple and sometimes so useless to have people keep a notebook with incidents, but having that documented pattern can be really valuable and powerful. If you can bring in a notebook or your notes that show on this date and this time and this date and this time and this date and this time, all these things happened. Sometimes you'll have records that can back that up that you might not think about. And so I think keeping that notebook, keeping that information available is valuable, because you can go back into phone records and you can see, did I get a call 20 times every night for a month from this line? Now, can we trace that line to the individual? Maybe, maybe not, but you do have that record. Same thing with text messages. Keeping those documented can help establish that pattern. And even if they stop, maybe they start again, and then we still have that whole pattern that goes to that same type of behavior. So I think that's really valuable. Looking back into the history of some of those things, like data breaches or phone or texts or whatever, sometimes that can be, expensive to have, like a forensic digital person examine devices, that kind of thing. But I think the most basic thing is a written notebook that has that information in it that can be valuable.
That's interesting, because often I imagine, and I just saw someone said I had that, but no one cared, is that you need to have some kind of physical evidence of that's like a photograph of something. But you're saying just by having that notebook and being able to go back to specific details, I'm thinking that even without hard evidence that's neutral, like pictures or recordings, that it establishes your credibility, that most people don't go back in time to specific dates and things and make it all up.
That's right. And even if you have that notebook and then maybe there's a gap and then something negative happens, you can say, this happened, I know this happened, I know it was this person, and I've got this notebook that shows. Well, if you've now gotten the police's attention, it is then possible for them to go subpoena the records from the cell phone company and get that data and do the research. So it's not all lost, even if it wasn't enough at one time to convince them to take action. Now that something's happened, they can go back and use that body of evidence to go gather more evidence. So I think it is really valuable.
Okay. I just saw another question about in the notebook. So maybe not just necessarily for stalking and surveillance, but are there other things that should be documented in general? Like, have you seen, it maybe in your field where someone's documented verbal abuse or different types of abuse, or is that something else that you can't comment on?
No, I think absolutely. Documenting, I think documenting anything that would be considered harassment or stalking or abuse is definitely helpful. And really, times, dates, the more specific it is, the more believable it is later, right? So if I just say he called me 20 times over the last 6 months, Okay, if I have a list of the time and the date and the phone number it came from and some notes about what was said, that's a lot more information. That seems a lot more credible. So I think documenting everything, we have a saying in this business, which is if it's not documented, it never happened.
I'm writing that down.
We live by that. If it's not documented, it's just my own statement. And how much credibility does that hold? If I wrote it down over a period of time, it holds more credibility.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and then I just saw another question come in. It's like, how do we get the authorities to take notice?
Yeah, well, I feel for everybody there because I work in this business. I deal with law enforcement, and I have been, even as a former law enforcement officer, I am often frustrated with the lack of attention or the time that we get. So I'll tell everyone, I really feel for them. I think documentation, being as logical and specific as possible, is very helpful. Understanding that they're really busy. They've got other cases where somebody actually has been injured. Oftentimes, right now, for example, Seattle Police Department is not going to respond quickly unless someone is injured. So if you got your house broken into and they took everything, you're not getting much help. If somebody's laying there bleeding or hurt, you're going to get a quick response. So just understand that we're to the place in some cities where it takes that to get an immediate response. So if you understand that, be patient, try to develop a relationship with someone, whether that's a deputy or a detective or someone else, where you at least have an open dialogue with them, and then being as logical and specific as possible. I don't know that I can recommend anything more than that.
No, those are great suggestions. And I'm thinking, I like how leading with empathy, like we call it the harsh New York reality check, but you're Seattle, Washington State. So, but the reality check is like, these people are really busy and there's other things that are more of an emergency. And so we just have to accept that, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, that's why we're not getting attention. It's not that we're just necessarily being ignored. But what you said about developing a relationship with someone in the department, I found that really helpful where I am as well. Like, I've developed relationships with some of our police, some who have retired, and I feel like I know if I need something, I know who I can reach immediately. And it just makes you feel safer when you have a name, when someone that's already spoken to you, that you can say, oh yeah, or I know this person and they said to come to you if there was another issue. So developing relationships is very important. And not just like filing lots of police reports against another person, right?
Right. Yeah. It's all of that helps because, they are people too. They're busy. Of all the police officers that I know, 99.9% of them would like to come out and help in all of these cases. I mean, they get into this business because they don't like people being abused or manipulated or taken advantage of. It's just the reality of where we are today, societally and budgetarily, that it's tough.
Yeah. All right. Well, Greg, thanks for staying on so long with me this time. I was going to say, do you want to just say how people can reach you?
Well, you're free to look up my name and my company name, and we have a business listing, and we're always happy to help if we can. I appreciate you doing this for everyone. This really, I think, helps everyone. It helps me to know this information is out there, because oftentimes people feel isolated. They feel alone. It's by the very nature sometimes of this kind of abuse that they feel isolated. So having this kind of information available is gold. And thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you for coming on and making it happen. And I'm sure we're going to do another one sometime.
Okay, my pleasure.
Okay, thanks, Greg. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Okay, bye.